There are certain astrologers who believe that we're actually marrying the greatest enemy of our past life.
Almost like a partner, look at them as a lesson.
Absolutely.
You are the lesson that I need to learn.
There's this concept in Bollywood, right? Do badan ek jar. Let me clarify this with Vedic astrology. There's no such thing like that. 8th house is my house of transformation. And only after I find my partner, I find that transformation. I don't find it otherwise.
Yeah.
Second house and the 11th house together, when they have a connection in a horoscope, they form a dhan yoga. Labh se lobh hota hai. 11th house, you get greedy with it. Also seen as a slightly negative house in that sense. Popularity, fame, success. If you're in the public line where you are trying to look for some sort of validation, see the quality of your 7th house. Vedic astrology is allowing you to look at everything in your life in a 360-degree manner.
Why is the moon so important in Vedic astrology?
Full moon is the night where you don't sleep because it's like having a sun in the sky, right? It's so bright. The earth does not sleep on a full moon night. New moon allows you time for intimacy. It's a great night for people to conceive because
Welcome back to Soul Safar with Bhav. In yet another riveting episode, I sit down with Medha and we talk Vedic astrology. Together, we explore that part of your birth chart that's most often ignored, your houses. What does it mean when there are too many planets in one house? Why do our festivals follow the moon? And why did your nani always say, Beta, aaj Purnima hai, khichdi mat khana? Together, we break all of this down, simply, practically, and with a little bit of fun. Let's begin. Medha, welcome to Soul Safar with Bhav.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Bhav. It's just so lovely to be here.
I know you started off as an actor and
Oh
a
my
model,
God, yeah.
and you've
Yeah,
gone through life, and you are now somebody who's very respected in the astrology world, in the world of astrology.
The world is kind, yeah.
Will you tell me how did you make this journey? What brought you to astrology?
Like you already mentioned, I was in the creative field and I was always a creative child. But I belong to a family of astrologers, and not just my immediate family, my ancestors. So this conversation that we had, where I'm talking to you and telling you, okay, I have this 5 paisa book, which is like 150 years old and belongs to my great-great-grandfather and uncle and all of that. So I belong to that sort of a family where our dining table conversations have been, oh, Jupiter is retrograde, don't do this today, and today this nakshatra is there. So, you know, as a child, I was overexposed to stuff like this, and being a kid, you know, and especially being a teenager, you get to that age and you're like, oh God, I'm too cool for school and this is just not for me, and oh God, this is so typical and I want to do something creative. And I was a very naturally, you know, creative kid, you know, debating, elocution, all of those typical stuff. But life happens, you know, and we all have our destinies, we all have our chart. Just a quick story that happened actually. So I met with a small accident, nothing big, but I basically had a huge cut on my forehead and my eye and all of that. You can't obviously see it now because it happened, you know, over 2 decades ago. And I am stitched up now because I've gone to the doctor. The doctor's given me these medicines and injection. I don't even remember what all I got, but I'm like passed out on the bed, and I'm coming out of that state. And you know, it's that this strange sort of state where you are half awake and half asleep and you don't even know where you are. And in that state, I am hearing this, that, you know, look up astrology. Why aren't you looking into astrology? Just go look it up, research it. And I have my humble pie literally in that moment, and I've woken up. And the next thing I've done is I've gotten onto, I don't know, it was my laptop, my sister's laptop, whose laptop it was. I've gone and just typed astrology on Google because that's my exposure to it in that sense. I don't know what to do, where to look. My God, after that moment, Bhav, my journey has been so fast, I would say, that I have looked at formulas and I've said, I know what to do. I don't even need to read the paragraph in the book after that. I know exactly what to do. Of course, it's not that I've not studied it. I've just gone to, my mom, I've gone to so many teachers and learnt it in a very traditional manner. In fact, I've not learnt it the way I now teach astrology to the world. That was that moment that really completely flipped my life in that sense, that I wasn't the same person anymore, because the minute astrology came into my life, life took a complete 180-degree turn to the point that my belief systems changed, my everyday routines changed, the way I started thinking completely changed.
Last season, we did 2 episodes on Vedic astrology.
Right.
And we covered the basics of Vedic astrology and we went into a few dashas and all of that.
Yeah.
I wanted to go in a different direction with you. I wanted for people to have basic knowledge about their own charts, maybe learn how to read their own charts. So that brings me to my first question. How can somebody read basic information in their own chart, even if they have zero knowledge of astrology or they're just starting to learn?
I love teaching astrology because I feel the way I studied, it was very traditional, it was very pedagogic, and I want to change that because my brain functions differently when I translate information.
Right.
Now, when you're asking me this question, I always tell people that, it's like asking, I don't have any background in medical, in the medical field, how can I do my heart surgery? And the answer, you and I, we both know that please do not attempt it. There is no way you're going to be doing a heart surgery on yourself or anybody that you love in your life.
Right.
So the short answer is that I always say go to an astrologer if you've not had any proper training in learning how to figure out your chart.
Right.
But at the same time, I am this person who wants to tell people that if you don't have any background in astrology, it's again like the medical world, that if you're sneezing or coughing, please don't run to the doctor saying, oh, I think I'm going to die. What am I to do?
Yeah.
You should at home be able to figure out that it's okay, you will have some ginger and you'll be fine. It's just like that. So the first thing that a person needs to do when they're looking into their birth chart is to look for the first house. Okay. And this is simple information. You can Google this. You can figure out in your horoscope where the first house is. This is called the ascendant. Okay.
Right.
This is the starting point of your horoscope. If as an astrologer, I'm making your horoscope and I'm mathematically doing it, or you have traditional astrologers जो हाथ से नहीं बनाते थे. So what is that starting point? मैं कहाँ से ये painting बनाना शुरू कर रही हूँ? That first dot that I put on the paper. That is your ascendant. Okay. The second would be the moon sign, because when we're trying to decipher a person, it's not how your nose looks or how your ear looks or your jawline. It's not that. I want to understand this person because I want to understand how their brain works. I want to figure out how you're making decisions, how you like things, you don't like things, what are the things that turn you off or what turns you on, I want to be your friend, so I want to know your common factors with me, how will we bond and gel. You, when you're seeing your own chart, you want to befriend yourself, right? You want to figure out who this person is through the horoscope. So you want to understand their brain first. So ascendant, moon. The third thing is the sun. And the way I explain this is that think of astrology. So with astrology, we say it's 5,000 years old, Vedic astrology, right? It's ancient. So I want you to think like the rishis who came up with astrology back then. What did they have around them? They had the kings, they had their armies, they had fights and wars between lands, all of that. So sun is like that king of the kingdom in your horoscope. It will decide how the rest of the planets will work in your horoscope. The moon is like the queen, right? If you want to understand what this kingdom is like, figure out the king's rule, figure out what his queen is like. Is she overpowering him? Is she subtle? Is she wise? Is she intelligent? Because a woman runs the house, right? No matter what is happening, the king is probably in a different country fighting wars, right?
Yeah.
But the woman is running the house. The sun and the moon become two very important entities in your horoscope. that's when you've kind of understood what this horoscope is all about. Of course, when you go deeper, you try and understand deeper things, that what are the challenges that come with this ascendant? How vulnerable is my moon? How strong is my sun? Sun is my self-esteem, a reflection of my ego and my practical understanding of how I deal with the world, how I interact with the world. The mind fluctuates and changes, which is the moon.
Right.
So I know how I'm fluctuating and changing. I am also understanding what is constant, and ascendant is the theme of my life. Are you getting totally butchered emotionally, physically, mentally in this lifetime, or it's an easy life with comforts? Do
Right.
you have the love of the people that you want? Or are you just spending your life chasing things, ambitions, all of that? So ascendant is the theme, and obviously the king and the queen. Yeah.
I had also read somewhere, and it's a quote that has lived with me, that if the planets are the characters, the different houses actually compile the stage.
Yeah.
So now I want to talk to you about the houses, the different houses, the 12 houses, and what their significance is in somebody's chart, so that somebody who sees their own chart, they can at least understand what is this house. I just also want to confess to you, and I feel a little ashamed, that very recently I figured out how the number is 1, 2, 3. Like I figured out very recently.
Yeah.
So if you can just explain set the stage for me here.
A lot of people get confused because in Vedic astrology, we have houses, different houses. So in a horoscope, you have these sections drawn.
Yeah.
They all have numbers in them. Okay.
Right.
But for your audience, these numbers are your zodiac signs, not the numbers of your houses. Okay. So that's the first thing to actually understand. And see, India is so vast and varied in the sense that in the north of the country, you have a certain kind of astrology. In the south of the country, you have certain kind of astrology. It's all governed by different belief systems and different calculations also. The mathematical calculations are different. Okay, there are different schools of astrology, I would say.
Right.
So the formation of your horoscope can look very different in the northern style of astrology, in the southern style of astrology. There are all kinds of shapes. Something is rectangular, circular, drawn in flower shapes or
Right.
whatever. It's bizarre, but that's the beauty of the country.
Right.
The grammar of all of it is the same. Okay, so to understand that, your first house is the centermost house. Okay, difficult to explain it like this right now, but
We'll show them graphically
that will help.
on the episode what the first house looks like.
Perfect. So, and we move anti-clockwise when trying to understand the houses in a
Right.
horoscope. Okay, the planets move clockwise, the houses move anti-clockwise. Okay, so the first house is your body. I was born and I incarnated into this body as a baby. That's your first house.
Right.
It's my body. Am I born healthy? Am I born unhealthy? Do I have my 10 fingers, 10 toes sort of a body? No, I don't. My incarnation in
Right.
this lifetime. That's my first house. Okay. My second house. Now, I'm born with the body. Where am I born? I'm born to my mother. I'm born to my father. Oh, guess what? I have a sibling. I have uncles, aunts, whatever. But this is my immediate family. I'm born. I go back to my house, right? The first thing that parents do once they've given birth, whether you're born in a hospital or wherever, I'm thinking of 5,000 years ago, you were born in your home,
Yeah.
your palace, your hut, wherever,
Yeah.
right? So your home, your mother and father become your second house. The third house is my siblings, elder, younger, whatever, uncle, aunts, cousins, all of that becomes my third house. Broadly, these are my things.
Right.
I'm born, mother picks me up, feeds me, right? Gives me the milk or whatever it is.
Yeah.
After that, I meet my siblings. I also learn how to be playful because guess what? They're my age. So that playfulness comes through third house. So there's a physical reality. There's also an emotional reality. They're running parallel. So
Right.
my parents, physical reality, nourishment, I'm receiving the love, all emotional, right? Third house is that playfulness. It gives me courage. We're cycling. We're pushing each other. We're jumping from place. All of that, right? Experiences start in the third house. The fourth house, again, the house of peace. So I've had all the fun. I've been nourished. I've eaten my food. I've played with my siblings. Now what do? I sleep. I go and rest, right? That could be in my mother's lap. That could be on my bed, my pram, wherever I rest. So fourth house, the house of your home, the place of rest and comfort. It's also, in the broader sense, your homeland, where you're born, the city, the country, all of that. Now, after I've rested, next thing, my mother starts teaching me, my teacher starts teaching me, right? Fifth house, the house of learning. So learning, whether it's my initial learning of schooling, college, arts, like am I dancing, am I, good at sports, all of that, that's my learning. What sort of learning am I having? It's also my luck, because after I've encountered my parents, my siblings, my home, I go out into the world. It's that luck factor. And what is that luck factor in Vedic astrology? What am I bringing as karma from different lifetimes? That we call it luck, but it's actually a cause and effect relationship in Vedic astrology. Now, when I've gone out into the world, I've learned things, I have tested my luck. Now it's time to get a job. The minute I get a job or find my relevance, I come across conflict, because not everybody is in sync with me. Not everybody is my sibling or my parent.
Correct.
So there's conflict. Now I start earning money. Now the money is not enough. The back and forth. I have a fight with someone. Why have they parked their car in my parking? That sort of stuff is 6th house. 7th house. Financially independent. Now what do I look forward to? Maybe having a partner who can
Relationship.
share the ups and downs of my life, right?
Yeah.
See, this is all common sense.
Yeah.
It's not that it's rocket science in any way. One thing will lead to another, which is what happens in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
designed, Vedic astrology is so beautifully designed
Yeah.
in that logical manner. So it's just about awakening that logic within you, and you kind of start predicting the next
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
what's going to come next.
Yeah.
The 7th house is my partner.
Sorry, can I just stop you? What's the beauty of the chart? The first house is there and the 7th house
Seventh
is
house
right
is
opposite it.
yes.
So I'm looking at my partner or my partner's looking at me. It's literally like I've completed one cycle of life and I've reached my partner.
Yeah.
And now the next cycle begins.
Yeah. And I love saying this to people, and they find it very uncomfortable. There's this concept in Bollywood, right? Ek badan do jaan and all of that stuff. Let me tell you, in Vedic astrology,
No, it's do badan ek jaan.
Sorry, do badan ek jaan. Let me clarify this with Vedic astrology. There's no such thing like that. You are you. You will always see your partner as your opponent, because karmically, I am the first house. You are the 7th house. You are the other.
Correct.
And I know at a spiritual level, we're told, no, there is no other. But that's your spiritual evolution.
Yeah.
That's where you need to get to. But the minute you're born, you're constantly seeing, oh, this is my friend, other.
Correct.
This is my partner, other. We are not on the same team. We are always on the opposite
Right.
team. Your evolution, emotional, spiritual, will bring you on the same team. But the way it's designed, karma is here. Karma is with the person in front. Now, you could be a friend or neighbor, a lover, doesn't matter.
Right.
And after the 7th house, or after I found my partner, now I'm looking for something slightly more intense, which is my 8th house. So 8th house is multiple things. It's my sexual intensity. It's my emotional intensity. Also transformation. Because transformation doesn't happen till I deal with the other. I am in my own house, in my own comfort. I'm fine. I'm going to think this is my world, this is my bubble. When I don't have somebody to challenge me, there's no evolution happening.
Right.
And I need that evolution in life, because this is what the purpose of life is, in that sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So 8th house is my house of transformation. Right? And only after I find my partner, I find that transformation. I don't find it otherwise.
Yeah.
That's how the
Yeah.
world is,
Yeah, and it's
designed.
beautiful, no? That your partner actually has the power to break you. They hold the key to enter, and it may sound uncomfortable, it may make some people uncomfortable, but your partner, you literally give them that knife saying, here, you can literally pierce my heart and break it open so I can learn what I need to learn. It's
Right.
almost like a partner. Look at them as a lesson.
Absolutely.
You are the lesson that I need to learn,
Yeah.
or you are the messenger. So it's
Yeah.
so important. And what you said just reminded me of that.
It is absolutely that. And you literally have to remind yourself that this is a person I am giving that knife to.
Right.
Now, it says so much about that person, whether they're using that knife against you, holding it, or, saving you, that there's like a bullet in your chest, and they're taking that,
Yeah.
using the knife to take that bullet out
Out.
also, So you have to be very mindful of choosing a partner,
Partner
also.
as
That's
well.
why we say.
Yeah.
But that's where the transformation
Happens.
is. Yeah.
You know, we're talking about our partners holding that knife in their hand. It almost seems like they're part of our karmic baggage that we are carrying from another life. How true is that?
It's absolutely true. And there are certain astrologers who believe that we're actually marrying the greatest enemy of our past life. Now, why is that? Why is that observation, come into place? That how do you very quickly undo the karmic baggage? I get married to you. I'm in service to you. You are unwell. I'm making chai. I'm pressing your feet. I'm taking care of you. You're going through your highs and lows. I'm constantly available. Easiest way to get done with karma many different lifetimes, because my entire life is devoted to you, right? So a beautiful way of seeing your partner as your greatest enemy. How do you make amends? You be there for them unconditionally through their highs and lows, and you've made your amends. Seventh house, while it's the house of partnerships, right? Personal and professional, it is also the house of our success. When I have to see popularity, success, so I have a lot of media clients, politicians, people in public life. We tend to say that, oh, you'll find your success when I'm looking at your 10th house of career. We'll come to that 10th house explanation in a bit. But no, it's not the 10th house. When you have to see popularity, and this is again for everybody who's doing their heart surgeries back home, see what your 7th house is like. That's about popularity, fame, success. If you're in the public line where you are trying to look for some sort of validation from the world around you, see the quality of your 7th house. So your partner, in a way, is redirecting your life in that sense, giving you the validation, giving you the affirmation. So you will see actually that people completely transform in their lives in terms of success, in terms of popularity, growth. Let's say my business wasn't doing so well. I got married and there my sales skyrocketed, right? Stuff like that. You would have seen people have gotten married and they've become big stars, bigger than ever before, right? And it doesn't happen so much with any other factor in their life other than having a partner. So that becomes a very crucial, point, a milestone in a person's life, I would say.
So I'm going to take you back, handhold you and take you back to our 9th house. Okay.
So from that 8th house transformation that the relationship brings into our lives, we go into 9th house. So fine, I found my intimacy, I found my transformation, but this transformation hasn't reached its peak. It's not reached anywhere. I'm still in that, I'm circling this half knowledge. 9th house becomes higher learning, the guru, the lineage that I can learn from, that part of my lineage that I can learn things from, right? So I end up getting more devoted to higher power. I form belief systems, right? Because all this life that I've lived so far has led me to maybe take up a pilgrimage to some place. I want to learn more. I want to see beyond that veil a little bit more, because the transformation has got me seeking now. After that comes the 10th house of elevation, of success, in that sense that whatever status I'm at, I'm going to elevate from there, which we always, as very traditional Vedic astrologers, we call it the 10th house of career, promotion. But we need to understand that we are in this world right now. It's 2025. The world has a certain way of functioning. So not everything is a career. Not everything is a promotion. Because I'm a Vedic astrologer. I'm never going to get a promotion in that sense in my life. I'm not becoming the vice president from a manager. So the vocabulary of our lives have changed. So we need to understand that astrology also, especially Vedic astrology, has the scope of evolution. We just need to be able to see it like that. That 10th house becomes our elevation in that sense of status. I've gotten my higher learning, right? I've met my guru also. Of course, my status is rising. My evolution has happened. Now, 11th house, after that, from the 10th house, is the house of gains. Now, it can be understood in two different ways. Gains is resources. I go meet a friend, I get an opportunity for my job, right? That's also a resource. That friend is a resource. Where is that aspect coming from? Where's that opportunity coming from?
Right.
So that's why we say that second house and the 11th house together, when they have a connection in a horoscope, they form a dhan yoga. That means, and dhan is not wealth. 5,000 years ago, it's not the money you just had.
Yeah.
You know, it's the opportunities. It's
Right.
what you got as resources. Somebody 5,000 years ago came and gave you a cow. That is a resource. Cow is going to sustain you.
Right.
So you have to see it like that. That in the modern times, it's not a gain that is a gain of wealth. I'm going to get money. I'm going to get a check. No, it is my resources around me. Does my neighbor show up when I'm in problem? That's my resource.
Yeah.
My friends show up, when I'm down and out. I've just had a breakup. My friends have showed. They said, okay, why don't you come with me for this class or this job? Join me on that. It's resources. 11th house is resources. It's also a tricky house because, some astrologers also say that labh se lobh hota hai. That means from gains, you get greedy.
Greed.
Oh, I've just got this beautiful couch, right? Now I need a cushion to match with this couch. Oh, I also need a nice carpet. Now I need to do up the curtains.
Right.
Karte wo sab change ho jata,
Right.
right? You just because of this one couch, right? And 11th house will do that. It's a bit tricky. You get your resources, you get greedy with it. Also seen as a slightly negative house in that sense. Moving from the 11th house to the 12th house. So this transformation, that 9th house transformation, something really interesting is happening here. That from the 9th house where I found my guru and found my belief systems and learning, I have found a higher status, right? That's the blessing of higher learning and the gurus. The 11th house now is going to decide, do I get greedy or do I not get greedy and gain and give back the gains to the world, right? That decides how I end up in my 12th house. 12th house is the house where you check out from. First house is my incarnation, started with my body.
Right.
Now 12th house is where I check out. Now how am I checking out? Am I checking out in a monastery? Am I checking out in a retreat, in an ashram, in a hospital, in a foreign country, faraway place? How and where am I choosing to check out? Am I choosing to check out in a meditation, in dhyan, which is what we call for spiritual people as Mahasamadhi.
Right.
How do I see that Mahasamadhi? It's the 12th house. But if you are going that route of labh se lobh hota hai, of, I'm getting greedy, you're ending up in a hospital. You're ending up, I've eaten too much, I'm overweight, I've got all sorts of diseases. Obviously, I'm ending up in a hospital and, checking out in a very painful, not so pleasant way, right? It's those sort of things. When you learn Vedic astrology and this whole chakra view, the round, that cyclical thing that you have checked out and you come back into the next life from the first house again. Next life also, you'll be born as a baby, second house moving to a certain family and going over the same cycle again and again and again. And that's why moksha as a concept becomes very important for us.
Right.
Who wants to go through this nonsense over and over again?
Right.
I feel as an astrologer, Vedic astrology has given me an understanding of this concept in such a nice way that it has inculcated a sense of detachment. And I feel that's why Vedic astrology becomes such a spiritual science, a spiritual learning for an individual, because you realize, what am I doing here? What a waste of my time and energy fighting with my neighbor, talking to my partner, saying, oh, why are you doing this? And why not invest here? Why is your socks here? All of that stuff. The futility of the everydayness, wiping your kitchen counter, putting the garbage, doesn't make sense, But you also realize that Vedic astrology is allowing you to look at everything in your life in a 360-degree manner.
Right. Also, the beauty is now I've started to look at astrology and your chart like a flower, which is so layered, because this, what we've spoken, is just the foundation.
Basically.
When the characters come in, it becomes a completely different ball game. And then I know iski drishti uspe and all that. Of course, thanks to Instagram only. But that, I think, is the next level of this conversation. I'm somebody who's so drawn to the moon and the lunar cycles. Obviously, now because you know stuff about my chart, you'll know. So I'm going to bring the conversation back to the lunar cycles, because I've also realized that most Indian festivals, let it be Diwali, Karwa Chauth, or Mahashivratri, it's all timed around the lunar cycle.
Yeah.
Why is the moon so important in Vedic astrology?
We've already discussed this, that sun is the static side of our energies and of our existence, and it's also the consistency that sun brings, right? That
Right.
sun is everyday rising, everyday setting. Is we're looking at it for our timelines,
Right.
right? Moon, on the other hand, is the fluctuating part, right? It's waxing and waning. It's changing shape, size, all of that. But also, what do we see moon as in Vedic astrology is that the happiness, the lightness of being. Sun is discipline. Sun will not rise at 12 in the afternoon ever. It'll always be 6, 7, depending on where you are in the
Right.
world, what season it is, all of that. There's a method to the madness, no matter how crazy it looks, right? Moon, on the other hand, is emotions, celebration, happiness. Because who's sitting in her chambers and feeling happy and celebrating? It's the queen. The
Right.
queen is dressed up, right? She's living the life. The king is doing the hard work, governing, fighting, sitting on a horse, whatever, right?
Right.
So we need to understand that core understanding of these two entities is very important when we're looking at things from a Vedic astrology perspective. It's also the Eastern lens. So not just in India, but in all Eastern cultures, all festivals are lunar aligned. Okay. We're following the moon because who are we? We are not the most disciplined people on the planet. We are not consistent with the sun. We try to be.
Right.
I try to meet you at 10 o'clock in the morning for a meeting. Will
Yeah.
I actually show up? No, there's traffic.
Yeah,
There is,
yeah.
there are 10 other things that come in my life.
Yeah.
What are we? We are beings that are constantly having an emotional response. So I'm going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. And you're going to say, oh, no, it's okay. You're my favorite person on the planet. It's okay. You're late. I will, I'll put up with your
Right.
late arrival. It's constantly an emotional conversation. So this is where we are coming from. This is a realization that people had 5,000 years ago
Right.
when they were trying to understand the universe around them. Now, when we're talking about festivals, it becomes very important to understand that festivals are celebration. They are an emotional expression only. They're not talking about discipline, consistency, and all of that. And the cycles of the moon become very important because you will see that most festivals are either on a new moon or a full moon.
Right.
Every day that moon is changing shape and size, we have given it a meaning. Any festival that is full moon governed will have a sense of celebration, festivities, being up in the night, celebrating, being with family, eating great food. Every festival that is on a new moon will have a very inward vocabulary. I'm going to pray, I'm going to look inward, I'm going to bow down to a higher entity. They will all have those,
Right.
that essence to that festival. Also, I'll add that one thing to the full moon and the new moon. What is a full moon and a new moon? I know the pop culture says, that you write your intentions on a piece of paper and then you let go and all of that stuff. But full moon, essentially for us in the Vedic culture, full moon is the night where you don't sleep because it's like having a sun in the sky, right? It's so bright. The earth does not sleep on a full moon night, right? So full moon nights are great for meditations. They're great for being up all night and doing your sadhana.
Yeah.
And that's why, you will see that in Bollywood, Hollywood, there's a wolf howling on a full moon.
Right.
Because the earth is awake,
Right.
And that's why we've given it a mysterious connotation. We've made it a bit esoteric. But that the real truth of it is, it's a very spiritualizing night because you're up through the day, you're up through the night. This is your sadhana, right? You're trying to sync yourself through the universe. Now, when it comes to a new moon is the night of rest.
Right.
Okay? You sleep. It's easy to sleep. It's easy to calm down your nervous system. You don't do too much of work. You don't do too much thinking. You retreat because it's dark. The universe has aligned it for you in such a way that you can go into your shell and you don't have to be out there, right? Take that one day in the month to think, to introspect, right? It's giving you that time.
Right.
Also, another level to this. There's so many layers to the universe that it's beautiful. And Vedic astrology just makes it also obvious in front of you. The idea that new moon allows you time for intimacy because it's dark. It's a great night for people to conceive because full moon is a night of passion. And in the traditional sense, we've never seen children being born out of passion. Passion is a very, new age term. Passion is for passion for the ultimate source, the love for the ultimate source, which is the creator of the universe. You can give it whatever name.
Yeah.
So when you have your Ras Leelas of Krishna and all of that stuff, full moon nights.
Right.
But the intimacy happens in the dark on a new moon night, because when you create a child in that intimacy, right, it's that private setting. Also, for women's hormonal cycle, your ovulation, if you're perfectly aligned to the moon cycle, which is what it is, right, the 28-day cycle, perfectly aligned hormonally, your ovulation should ideally happen on a new moon night. You're ready to conceive. On a full moon night, it's that day where the menstrual cycle begins. So in a way, nature is so perfectly aligned for you to conceive, to give birth, to create your family. The next generation is coming in through that intention of the cosmos.
Wow.
And not just you alone.
Is it okay to say, as a blanket rule, that if you want to conceive a child, a new moon night is ideal?
It is ideal. But then also, we are so misaligned when it comes to our syncing with the cosmos that women are not ovulating on the new moon night, right? The ups and downs of our own hormonal cycles, the men are not aligned. So it's not just the women going through those cycles. The men also have their cycles, right? And if you're completely aligned, then it's beautiful to conceive on a new moon. Ideally, we say that that's the night for intimacy, not a full moon night, because then you're out in the world doing your sadhana. It's a spiritual night. You don't involve yourself in intimate conversations, intimate acts. You do your sadhana. You're in the sharan of your guru, as we say, or you're in the sharan of the cosmos. You're with the moon, the cosmic mother, and you're healing from it. You're learning from it.
I also want to ask you, is it true that according to Vedic astrology, our new year should actually not begin in December? Our new year begins in like March or March.
Yes.
That's how.
So March and April depends upon our lunar calendar.
Right.
Which is,
So actually, we should be celebrating New Year in March or April and not on 31st of December?
Absolutely, because we're following the Georgian calendar, and that doesn't make sense to us, right? The Eastern calendars, so the Chinese culture is following the Chinese calendar, and they have their own Chinese New Year. So for convenience, yes, globally we are adopting a common calendar, but there's wisdom in our Hindu calendar. It's not random. There's nothing, just whimsically done and given to you and say, okay, go celebrate this festival on this particular day. There's so much logic to it. In fact, to a point that what day, what season, what to eat, how to sleep, what to do, everything is just given, and logically given, that why you should have a certain kind of meal in the rainy season as opposed to what you should eat in a winter season, and our seasons also named like that. There's a karma attached to those seasons. We worship particular gods only in those seasons. We celebrate only those particular festivals in those seasons, and we're not worshipping other entities and, not following a certain format. And it's beautiful. The more you get to know it, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but it blows your mind, because you're like, this is what I feel like. This is what my body wants. But, I'm
taught otherwise.
Yeah, I'm taught otherwise. It's a brainwash in that sense.
The more I explore, the more I'm hooked in. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because now healing has a face.